All right, page 156, Secrets of the Genesis Narrative. The most fundamental aspect of the Arcanum is that writings of the Scriptures, principally Genesis, are laid in rich symbolism that serve to conceal deeper mysteries than the surface narratives convey. The Genesis account of Adam and Eve begins with these symbols: a garden, two trees, one of life and the other of knowledge, and a serpent that deceived them. The garden is a prophetic type of how eternal earth will be, the restoration of Edenic paradise. This Arcanum has unveiled a tremendous amount of evidence that the tree of life and of knowledge were not literal trees, but architectural monuments with inscriptions upon them written by God. Such would not have been the only time God has written actual writings for man. The Ten Commandments were written with a finger of God, and so was Min Tekel Upharsin, the enigmatic message written to the Babylonian king who lost his empire in the days of Daniel the prophet. The finger of God also wrote in the sand when Jesus himself was brought a woman caught in adultery, the Lord saying, "He that is without sin cast the first stone." Writing in the sand must have struck a powerful fear into the hearts of these Pharisees who sought to trap Jesus, for a man was before them claiming to be God, who was also writing in the sand during a conversation involving judgment. These men of learning knew well the inference being made by Christ, for the Scriptures clearly read that the wicked are written in the earth. 87. It is this author's belief that Jesus was writing the names of the Pharisees who brought the woman in the sand. Another such writing of God in the beginning concerns the tree of life and tree of knowledge. Trees were particularly venerated long ago because they were seen as a source of nourishment, shelter, shade, and building materials. For this reason was this symbol employed to describe two monuments in Eden accessible to man that were covered in the writings of the Creator. One was the Book of Life, made accessible to Adam and Eve, and the other was the forbidden book of knowledge of good and evil. This is consistent with the Sumerian belief that the tree of life was merely an image of the truth. The name for the Sumerian protector of the tree of life, Nin-Gish-Zida, is also translated as Lord of the Artifact of Life. 88. These trees in Eden were actually containers of knowledge. Just as the trees were symbolic types of deeper truths, so too is the serpent figurative for something else. The serpent that literally spoke with Eve was not a true snake. The writing of the Book of Enoch tell us that before the flood, evil spiritual beings, against the commandments of God, taught mankind forbidden knowledge not meant for human comprehension, such as hybridization and metallurgical sciences, herbalism, astrology, warfare, feminine cosmetics, and how to kill an embryo in the womb. 89. Abortion. Evidence of such forbidden information is also found in Enoch in the form of an astounding metallurgical secret that lead is not naturally produced from the earth. 90. How did this become known in antiquity? Lead is radioactive waste, a byproduct of radioactive decay of heavier isotopes such as uranium and plutonium to less radioactive elements. In the beginning, which was perfect, lead would not have existed. Lead deposits and trace elements are evidence of a series of prehistoric catastrophic events, and ancient man's awareness of it was by supernatural means. This knowledge were delivered unto men by demonic beings bent on frustrating the plans of God and replacing them with a glorified humanity. Such ancestral memories earned these beings the name of demon, which is from an old root meaning to know. The serpent in Genesis is from a Hebrew word nahash, itself derivative of nish, which means to decipher, find out. 91. The Christian Gnostics believed that the serpent meant instructor. 92. The Egyptian hieroglyph of the serpent, cobra, is the determinative, for special keeper of concealed secrets. 93. And the serpent sign called the Tet of Egypt signifies speech, to tell. 94. Philo wrote that the serpent was actually a dragon uttering the voice of man. 95. In Greek, drakon means the seeing one and is a word for serpent. Another word for serpent was ophis, from optesthai, to see, a root from which our English optics derives. Python is yet another Greek word for snake, literally meaning the knowing one. 96. The serpent was the arch deceiver who convinced Eve to listen to him as he taught her knowledge gained from the surfaces of the book of knowledge of good and evil. Mankind was then living in a perpetual state of perfection and harmony with the Creator, and the adversary, typified as the snake in Genesis, knew that he had to cause mankind to fall in order for him to become the mighty red dragon we find in the Revelation. His evolution from serpent to seven-headed red dragon is a popular myth embedded in the lore of virtually every culture on earth, a destiny encoded in the symbols of scriptures that typify him. No other being was more qualified than the former archangel once called Lucifer, or the day star, to teach Eve the difference between good and evil. In the Gospel of Nicodemus, we read a glimpse of these elder traditions. O Prince Satan, thou keeper of the infernal regions, all thy advantages which thou didst acquire by the forbidden tree. 97. In order to gain spiritual dominion over the earth, Satan had to reduce mankind to earthly beings bereft of their own divine essences. When Adam and Eve ate of the tree of knowledge at the tempting of the serpent, they were stripped of their garments of light. 98. This is why God forbade Adam to touch the tree of knowledge so long as the good and the evil are linked together. 99. In the Quran, we find that Iblis, Satan, refused to bow down to mankind, a passage in reference to an accursed tree. This divine and cursed tree was the tree of Zaqqum, which is the food for the sinner, a tree that springs in the heart of hell. 100. Because Lucifer had already taken forbidden knowledge and lost his first estate, he sought to make mankind suffer his fate as well, a belief also reflected in the Quran. Lo, those of old and those of later time will all be brought together at an appointed time on a day known only to Allah. Then lo, you, the erring, the deniers, you surely will eat of the tree of Zaqqum. 101. The fallen spiritual beings lost their garments of light and sought desperately to keep the men of the earth from acquiring their lost positions among the divine government of God. They knew that if they could divert worship away from the Creator, they could keep as many souls from Him as possible in order to delay their own judgment. These entities, according to the Quran, were made of smokeless fire and called the jinn. They were led by Iblis, who orchestrated a rebellion against Allah. Once ousted from heaven, these beings were found guilty of having men worship them on earth. 102. Evidence that the fruit eaten by Eve and shared with Adam was not actually a fruit is found in the book of Adam and Eve 1:103, which claims that in the Garden of Eden, eating and drinking was unknown to Adam and Eve. Evidently, nutritional sustenance was not required until they lost their garments of light. This fruit was no more literal than when Christ said, "You will know them by their fruit," which was a reference to Proverbs 11:30. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that winneth souls is wise. This is what the adversary did. He deceitfully won their souls, albeit temporarily, by the dissemination of evil knowledge, securing himself terrestrial kingship over Eden, also temporary. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a hieroglyphic text reads, "He hath eaten the knowledge of every god," 104, which was a prerequisite to obtaining safe passage through the underworld on one's way to the afterlife. This is similar to Nepalese tantric writings, which claim that heavenly beings were created before mankind and later visited Earth, tasting its food and remained trapped here for eating it. 105. This is a complete reversal of what happened to mankind. Humans tasted divine knowledge they were not permitted to indulge in and lost their glorified bodies. This being, after heavenly angels tasted earthly food and were cursed to remain here for defiling their bodies, is found in the Nepalese writings. Amazingly, the eating of knowledge to obtain salvation is found in the esoteric writings of the book of Enoch, which reads, "And on that day were two monsters parted, a female monster named Leviathan to dwell in the abysses of the ocean over the fountains of the waters, but the male is named Behemoth, he who occupied with this breast a waste wilderness named Duodain, on the east of the garden where the elect and righteous dwell, where my grandfather was taken up the seventh from Adam." 106. This passage was a part of the fragmented book of Noah and was written from the perspective of Lamech, father of Noah. The seventh from Adam, of course, is Enoch, taken up into heaven at Akuzan, the antediluvian site now called Giza, where Methuselah and other Sethites erected the pyramids and Sphinx as per the divine instructions given to Enoch in heaven. The records of the ancient Hebrews reveals that another monument pillar was erected before the deluge, as has already been detailed in this work, that was destined to be buried beneath the sea by the flood and remain there. But the Giza complex was to survive this cataclysm and endure the millennia to be a continual reminder to man of Earth's future fiery deluge. The author of this part of the Enochian fragments asked an angel what these two beasts represented, but the angel said, "Thou son of man, herein thou dost seek to know what is hidden." 107. Amen. To the archaic mind, the wilderness, deserts, and oceans represented places on earth that signified death, regions roamed by the creatures of death such as scorpions and crustaceans. Oceanic waters were believed to be the residual left over from a prehistoric flood that ruined the old world. Deserts were viewed in much the same way, a place where earth itself was still dead. Nothing is fruitful in a desert, it was popularly believed, because God visited destruction upon it in a prior epoch. Thus, the sea and desert became places where evil was wont to reside. "May the curse depart to the desert" was a popular expression in Babylonian verse 108. The name Duodain is also Dendain, from the Hebrew Dindayan, or judgment of the judge 109. Deserts and oceans are symbols of judgment. Though in distant antiquity the identities of Leviathan and Behemoth were shrouded in mystery, symbols identifying themselves as food, by the meticulous assembling of the varied elements of the arcanum as seen throughout this work, we understand that Leviathan and Behemoth together are metaphors for the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, and by extension the Giza pyramids, Behemoth, and their guardian Sphinx, Leviathan, that rests over the deep. There is another similar interpretation well favored by this author. Leviathan could also be a reference to the other pillar of the Sethites that was specifically designed to be destroyed with the flood. It now lies beneath the ocean somewhere on Earth. This would identify the two types of land surfaces in the world representing judgment. Behemoth identifies dry land, whereas Leviathan the ocean. In Genesis, God gave to mankind the beasts of the earth as food, 110, which terrestrially, Leviathan, great serpent, and Behemoth, huge beast, are beasts of the earth that probably walked the earth and swam the seas in prehistoric times when the great lizards reigned under original draconian earth. Poetically, as the adversary feeds upon the souls of humanity in his efforts to delay judgment, so too has God given over Satan's earliest minions to be resources of mankind in the form of fossil fuels, coals, bitumens, and natural gases, all formed from the decomposition of billions of prehistoric life forms. Concerning these two beasts, Enoch wrote, "And these things I saw toward the garden of the righteous, and the angel of peace who was with me said, These two monsters prepared conformably to the greatness of God shall feed." 111. Apparently, though the Enochian text is broken, it contains a reference to feeding the righteous. This is derived from Jewish writings claiming that Behemoth and Leviathan were created to be food for the righteous in Messianic times. 112. Since Leviathan and Behemoth are made conformably to the greatness of God, just as man is but an earthly image of God, these two beasts may be images of God in beast form, prepared for consumption by mankind at an appointed time. The Psalms also refer to Leviathan as being meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness, 113. In the beginning of man, the learning of forbidden knowledge corrupted Adam and Eve, and the very beings, animals, that they were appointed to exercise dominion over and guard became their sustenance in the exact same way that the adversary delayed his own demise by feeding on the spirits of humanity. It is this revelation that is unveiled in the Arcanum, and it is the Great Pyramid that foreshadows the time when mankind will be freed from the curse after divine fires purge the spirits of the holy, when terrestrial fires consume the earth, and when eternal fires fuel his judgment. There is nothing more fitting than to end this text with an emphatic amen. However, there is one other curious word integral to the Arcanum, also found abundantly and with equal mystery throughout the Scriptures, yet to receive worthy attention. This word is Selah, and like an amen, it was an expression of hope referring to the coming one, a phonetic expression meaning fire of the everlasting, 114. But both will have to wait, for this work is not finished.